Essentially, my main point is that one of the biggest changes which is happening is globally is the changing population patterns with increasing urbanization and the associated risks. And I don't think the sector is effectively geared to respond to it. The second thing that I notice, and it's not a new theme in itself, is that increasingly conflicts, not increasingly, almost pretty much almost all conflicts in today's world are internal civil strife based issues, either on identity or resources, and which means that there are a lot of IDPs, a lot more IDPs than refugees actually. While the refugees are being catered to through international funding to an extent, the IDPs are much more worse off, and which means that the humanitarian sector needs to be able to redefine both legally in terms of international law what it means to do humanitarian work in these sort of conflict zones which are largely internal, and how would one work towards the second principle of the Neosphere Handbook, which is on access, right to access, and I think that needs a lot more emphasis. The third thing that I noticed is, but it's an increasing trend, is the transformation of the humanitarian space in terms of who are humanitarian actors and who are not. At the end of the day, the whole definition and perception around neutrality and impartiality is being challenged more than ever. I mean, I think the trends, in a way, reflect the challenges of um, how we perceive ourselves as a humanitarian sector, who is a humanitarian actor. Other challenge which I perceive is the changing donor patterns and the increasing requirements of donors to comply with certain process standards, which is often to the disadvantage of, I would call, non-Western, smaller NGOs. That remains a significant challenge, but it's also an opportunity in a way, because it means that the system and the traditional humanitarian agencies need to gear up, need to strengthen their processes, um, while not compromising on the primary objective of humanitarian response. More confusing, more diverse, more challenging. Okay, to me, the humanitarian sector is going to have many more actors with multiple uh, objectives and mandates, which will make it more difficult to manage, coordinate, and will lead to more confusion on the ground when there is a response going on. I can't foresee per se what will be the trend in 10 years, but I do believe that increasingly the lines between development and humanitarian work will be blurred, which will be a challenge in itself, and there would be a lot more private actors and government actors which will muddle the humanitarian space. For the future, what I see significantly for the Sphere project is to be able to reach out to the non-traditional partners of Sphere, or the people who are not partners of the Sphere project already. By this, I mean that we're not talking about NGOs or INGOs, but we are primarily talking about convincing donors that you need certain level of guidance and support on what should be done minimally for operations. We need to get greater buy-in from government actors. If you look at the world today, increasingly countries who are recipients of aid are enhancing their capacities significantly. And by that, the governments are becoming much more assertive in terms of what they want, what space they will provide or not provide. So that's the challenge. But it's also an opportunity if you can convince or you can engage with government systems that here is an operational handbook, here is something that the project is offering, this is what has been globally agreed. What do you think? What can you do to adapt this? Because here is something which works, and there is evidence that you can take this as a guidance tool, and that is the key role Sphere Project needs to play, probably as an agent and a body for both engaging and advocacy and negotiation on defining humanitarian work. The other thing which is significant and important is the way that Sphere has gone about working with companion standards. It's great to have the companion standards, but I think this Sphere project needs to think of consolidation now, instead of diversification into more and more, with more and more sectors, uh, for companion standards. And in a way, I'm glad that the joint standards initiative that was undertaken, Sphere project backed out of it, because the fundamental basis of the Sphere project is volunteerism, is that we engage with the Sphere project as people who want to achieve a particular minimum for those who are displaced. And that cannot be defined in terms of the key indicators, but in terms of the expressions of human rights, which is the standards. And I think that's different from the more process-oriented standards, which have a mechanisms of audit and sanction, which doesn't work for a number of, I would say, 95% of the organizations and actors who respond to emergencies. So Sphere has a key role to play in that space to create an inclusive, safe environment where different actors are able to engage on what should be the nature of humanitarian response. So probably it needs to go more proactive. It probably needs to go more advocacy oriented, and it probably needs to engage with more diverse actors as partners.